Good evening all. Welcome to the Guildhall on this fine Monday the 13th of January for the session of the full council. So we've got a reasonably crackly agenda this evening, so we'll whack straight into it. Apologies. Do I have any apologies?
No apologies, Chair. Oh, one apology,
Caroline?
Chair.
Councillor Jenny Bolwell is an apology.
Okie dokie. All right, public questions and statements. Okay, we have a few on a couple of subjects this evening. So we'll take those now. As these aren't really in the public domain or haven't been exposed to councillors yet, Penny, will you be able to read them out? So we'll take the first ones on allotments first, please. Penny, over to you.
Mr. Mayor and councillors, the first email we received relating to allotments was, I think a 25% increase is a bit harsh in one hit. Could this not be staggered? For example, a 15% increase for 2025?
Yes, that was purely in terms of prioritisation, turning my attention to the income reconciliation processes, which needed a complete overhaul during the year, and then the budget setting started. It sounds like a very weak excuse, and it is a very weak excuse. I should have had the capacity and the resources to be able to do everything, including bringing bank reconciliations up to scratch. So I apologise for that. But as I've said in the covering report, the internal auditor said they must be brought up to date by the end of this financial year, and I've promised that they definitely will be.
Thank you, Steve. Any more, Brian?
Thank you, Chair. It's not a nitpicky comment, but under what Paul's just brought up, should that be a pound sign and not a euro sign, 500,000?
Yeah, there shouldn't be any euro signs in the report. I apologise for that.
Okay, any more? No? Steve, from my perspective, given the job that you walked into clearly wasn't the job that it turned out to be, don't beat yourself up too much. I think you've done quite a remarkable job from when you first set foot in the door to where we are now. So don't kick, you've done a pretty good job. Okay, recommendations to note the report. Are we all happy to note? We are? Okay, report noted. Item 13, budget monitoring report to the end of November. Steve, front and centre again.
Numbers mean to please just ask me to take you through. Important that you do understand exactly what these reports are saying. Does comments on any Appendix A is probably the most important sheet of paper, because that gives you a complete picture of what the council's financial situation was like at the end of November. So if you've just generally that should be compared with what you actually spent or we received as income. But of course, this is a report as at the end of November. So comparing the whole year's budget with a partial year's actual is not going to be very helpful at all. So what we do is we take that whole year budget in column 1 and then we profile it up to the end of November. So that's the officer's best estimate for each of the budgets, and these are just summary budgets, but all of the lines of the budget in the background, for each one of those, it's our best estimate as to how much income or expenditure we should have spent or received by the end of November. And then the third column is the most important column to an accountant, which is the actuals. Budgets are just plans, they're just estimates, they could be completely wrong, but actuals you can't argue with. This is actually what we've spent or received up to the end of November. So really this budget monitoring report, like any other budget monitoring report, is really comparing the budget estimated to the end of this period with the actuals. And then the final column is the magic column, which is just a simple subtraction of the actual away from the budget to see whether or not it's good news or bad news. And in the format of this, negative brackets are good news, positive unbrackets are bad news. So if you just look down to the bottom of the page, in terms of the variance column, the final right-hand column at the end of November, this council was £566,000, £792 underspent according to our best estimate of what the profiled budget to the end of November are. Those are very, in some instances, very crude estimates of what the whole year's budget to the end of November pro rata is. And so therefore there is a big risk that a lot of that that apparent underspend is purely caused by us not estimating well enough by the end of November. So we need to treat that fairly cautiously, but it's going the right way. If it was 566,000 overspent, there would be panic at this stage. So it's going the right way, but nevertheless, a large element of it could just be purely bad estimates. So the reason why this looks different to your previous budget monitoring reports is the little bit tagged on at the bottom there under the first figures, which is saying for the whole year's budget, forget what the position at the end of November was. Let's just assume for the whole year that officers now spend the whole year budgets or achieve the whole year income budgets. What would that look like in terms of the council's outturn? So this is a very pessimistic view, whereas on the right-hand bottom of that column, that's a very optimistic view. So you've got two extremes here. So that first column of figures, as you see, it adds up to £423,099 is a total of the revenue cost centres underspent. And then the capital cost centres, the Z cost centres need some of those from revenue. So there's £228,683 that will be needed of that 423 underspend to pay for the capital works that we're doing this year. That leaves a total revenue position at the end of, should say November, so I apologise for that, of £194,000 underspent, sorry. And then there are what are the pressures between that position and the end of the year that we know about now that were never budgeted for. And so there are two lines there, the HMRC National Insurance Voluntary Disclosure Interest amount, we weren't aware of until very recently when the HMRC gave us that figure. Irrecoverable VAT to be repaid to HMRC, that's another historic problem that we've come across, reported at Finance and Governance Committee, but that's going to be an unbudgeted pressure of £154,000. So taking all of that into account, that would leave us with a predicted outturn variance pessimistically £16,000 underspent, which is next to zero in the grand context of all of this. So there you have the two extremes that we're trying to narrow, which is an optimistic view that the underspend, as best estimated at the end of November of 566,000, could continue to the end of the year. If officers continue to try and economise and don't spend all of their budgets on all of the services they need to do, we could come in that optimistically, or pessimistically, if we now spend all of our budgets in the last quarter of the year more than we did up to the end of November, then we're probably looking at coming in very, very close to zero, which, you know, the actual outturn will be somewhere between those two. So apologies, we can't be more precise at the moment. We've taken a very prudent a view and assumed a zero outturn, which is at the pessimistic end of that spectrum in terms of the budget setting report we look at later on. So we're doing everything as prudently as possible and not building too much optimism bias. Explains why this report looks a little different to previously, because updated and informed information we can in order to help you is much the same format as previously. That's a list of all of the variances were either over £50 that we thought you'd want to know about, and the body of the covering report then explains each of those variances from Appendix B. And then Appendix C gives you the latest update on the reserve position. And if you remember from earlier discussions, the general reserve is the only freely available savings account resource that you can use for any purpose at all. So that's the one that I think that the financial regulation that specifies minimum reserves, I think it was aimed at purely just the general reserve. So that's the amount of money you've got for a rainy day that you can use for any purpose at all. But the three other pots of money, the three other, what used to be called reserves, we now call them receipts, is the CIL, the Community Infrastructure Levy receipts, which are council money but can only be used for CIL purposes. Capital receipts, which are council money but can only be used for capital expenditure, or the Section 106 receipts, which is council money but can only be used for discharging those obligations in specific legal agreements. So because there was confusion a year ago about what the £2 million of reserves look like, as you remember, this is us splitting up it into those four pots. You can see if there's any movements on any of those pots. And of course, you'll know from my report on the budget setting, the general reserve is far lower than our policy suggests it should be. And from an RFO's point of view, I would like to see that increase as quickly as possible. To hopefully inform the budget setting debate later on, but I'm happy to take any questions on this report.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Pretty comprehensive as ever. So what we're saying is we have all the right amounts of money. They just happen to be in all the wrong places, to coin a phrase from a comedy show many years ago. Questions for Steve? Caroline.
On Appendix A, is it an error because it says October on the paperwork and you've talked about November? That's fine. But as far as all the pots of money, it's lovely that they can all be used for specific things, but we just need to make sure that we are taking it from the right pot at any point in time.
Thank you, Karen. Any more for any more? I reckon you've got away with this one, Steve. Okay, thank you very much. Much appreciated, Steve. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your efforts. Okay, folks, it's the main event. So tonight, budget setting. What we have to do out of tonight's meeting is to set a legal budget that we can all stand up to. And as importantly, we have to inform Wiltshire Council of the precept that the city is going to impose on its residents as a result of this meeting. So we have two proposals on the table today. We have the Conservative Group's proposed budget and medium-term financial plan, and we have the administration's proposed budget and medium-term financial plan. So this year we have two items to compare. So the agenda, item 14, the Conservative Group goes first. Councillor Nettle, I believe you are presenting on behalf of the Conservatives. Over to you.
Absolutely correct, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for allowing me to do so. So there's no confusion, of course, the Conservative paper, the budget paper, is in light blue. The administration's budget is in a yellowy colour. And I think that's been really useful to identify those, but I just want to be clear so there's no confusion. It's actually a pleasure to present this budget on behalf of the Conservatives. The last time I was allowed to present a budget, we in fact were looking at our reserves of 1.25 million within the policy. That was absolutely right in reserves. That excluded any capital receipts or community infrastructure level or 106. So it's nice to be back. Thank you. And I also like to thank all of the Conservative councillors for their input. We've had a lot of discussions internally, also had more discussions with the officers, and I'd like to thank Asa and his team for permitting that, not only facilitating it, but sometimes those meetings being really, really good. I said last time at F&G that actually it's quite difficult to challenge a very good budget from the administration, and I compliment the administration on that. And that's not a side kick or anything like that. It's a genuine. Why I do that is because that what they've achieved in their budget is achieving a zero precept in years 4 and 5, highly commendable. And I think that, which is something I know that all political parties wanted to aspire to. So I give congratulations where it's due. I also said that I felt, and I was picked up on this, I felt there was a bit of a lack of imagination. It was very much a business as usual. There was nothing really new for residents. And given the consultation that's been on, that came out from our officers just prior to the budget setting, it was quite sad to read some of those comments and also the percentages of people feeling that we around this table weren't giving them the service that they just felt that they should have. And that's always been hard. And so What we put in our budget is £10,000 for consultation, and I'm very pleased. I'm just wanting to check this actually while I've got the chair. Is that both our suggestion for a trial for the stage, I believe now has been accepted by the administrations, but it's just, of course, in the time frame, it's not updated in the papers. I just want to, yeah, absolutely check. That's good. So it does show, though, some of the detail of our budget, because to be honest, when you read these two, you could think it's sort of déjà between our two budgets. We have tried to put together a budget approved by officers, and I think that actually is probably, and I'll look to my fellow grandfather councillors, I think it's the first time that this parish council has received both Conservative and a Lib Dem or Dem budget together. I think there's been aspirations, but I think this is the really, we've been listening to the public and tried to come up with a number of programs, schemes within revenue. So, for example, one of our biggest, mainly around trying a scheme to raise and protect Churchill Gardens car park. Now, there's more reason for doing that is because it's primarily flooded for quite a lot of the time. And we believe there's an opportunity not only for an income generation by doing this over a longer period, but it may be an opportunity to test some of the ideas eventually of payment on exit and taking this over completely. And dare I say, declaring UDI against Wiltshire Council on car parking. And I think this is a scheme that has got legs. It's got some serious costs to it. Appreciate that. But this is a scheme that we've worked with the officers to look at. The second one on here is a multi-use residence and the school by supporting the area behind the school, which is pretty damp most of the year, in putting an artificial turf down there so that local children can use that as a play area. It could be five-a-side football, for example. I could take points on that from last time, but it will not be exactly what you've got at Old Sarum, which I know was a multinational, multi-pound project. So that was the scheme there. And this is really because we've tried to hear, and we have heard from residents, as we all have, is that they want to see more use of our recreational areas. And this is a plan to do that. The other area that we wanted to tackle was very much about a splash park. Now, most of us have visited other towns and cities who've seen these splash parks. Some of them are in the central market area, and you can see and I know that when the market was redone from being a car park to its vista that it has now, that a water feature was suggested. And I'm also fully aware that that was the administration at the time fully rejected that. I think that what we have seen, though, is our parks are very, very well used. You know, I live just opposite Leasy Gardens, and families are there when it's weather's good and use that well. And I think that people do like water type features, and this type of splash park is pretty good. And when we come to questions, there's various councillors who can respond to some of these projects, should you wish to ask them. So I think that's really possibly the biggest difference. Of course, our major thing that we've put in here is looking at events and a stage, and we really want to get that. And I'm so pleased that the administration, and we are all pleased that the administration has accepted that. Mr. Chairman, I'm not going to ramble on much longer, but to say that the rest is very similar to what the administration proposes. Our timeframes for certain costs from this budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy. Councillor Broom, you had your hand up just a second ago. You wanted to mention a little bit about your proposals for part of that, yeah?
I'm happy to clarify the suggestion for the splash park. It's something that we have discussed before, and I know that there are some members around the table that don't like the idea, but I would suggest that it's not about what we might like or not like. It's about looking at our demographic, looking at the families within the city and what they enjoy doing. And I know that there are many young families that travel quite some distance to visit other splash parks out of the area. And I really feel that if that's something that we can support and look at options for, and it's very much a suggestion and asking officers to explore the idea and how attainable it is, that it's something that we should consider doing for members, for families in the city and beyond. And if it helps them to come into the city more often and enjoy our parks more and spend time together, then, you know, that to me is a positive contribution. And when we're setting these budgets, you know, we should try and be aspirational and do things for people in the city. And again, it's not about what we want, it's about looking and thinking about how we can make our city more attractive to all of the people that live in it and around it. So that's the idea behind the suggestion, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Broom. And I'll chip in here a second on the car park, because I know the question is going to be asked. Is it costed? Is it costed down to the nearest square yard and half ton of gravel? No. But is it an indicative cost done by a reputable construction company? Yes, it is. So the number isn't being plucked out of thin air. It is a reasonable expectation. Okay. So thank you, Jeremy. Thank you, Joe. Over to the floor. Ian, I think your hand was up.
Well, firstly, can I just thank Jeremy for his kind words to the administration, the Liberal and the Labour groups administration with Annie Riddle. I think it's nice to hear words from the Conservative group praising our budget, which is about to come. And, you know, I also slightly admire your ambitious budget. But equally, that is the risk of this budget. Not so long ago, we were being criticised as a council, as administration, for being bankrupt. At the time, we thought it was a very bad terminology because there was no reason for that. But now, less than 6 months later, we see quite an ambitious medium-term plan. And the problem with some of the issues, and I have a real problem with the £350,000 scheme for Churchill Gardens, and the basic problem I have with that is around, it's on a floodplain, and how do you overcome that? And I don't think the Environment Agency would even let it be a goer. But the problem I have with the other things is that it's the wrong time. We need at this moment to build our reserves up to what our policies say they should be. And we're just, in years to come, that these options might be there, but the timing is wrong. And a lot of things in life are timing. We've gone through, because of the financial regime we've had to change, we've gone through a difficult period, and now we are proposing to do something that it would put the council's finances at risk. This is not time. We need to wait around the corner, too many unexplained or unplanned things that come along. But having said that, we never knew we were going to have COVID. We need to get our reserves up before we start being ambitious again. So it is all about timing. Get our finances really strong, and then we can look at what other options there are about. Otherwise, if we don't get our finances strong, there is a risk we won't be able to provide the public with anything, because we'll have to make huge cuts and take away services. So that's wait a while. That's build up our reserves. Let's get our finances in a really strong position. And then, yes, in a number of years' time, perhaps in 5 years' time, we look at some of these suggestions you make.
Thank you, Ian. Sorry, just to step back. Councillor Netter, are you proposing the Conservative blueprint? Thank you. Sorry. Next, I have Councillor Sutton.
Chairman, which leaves me the question that if we tonight
vote for the Conservative budget, and then we, in 25 minutes or maybe half an hour on, we then vote through the administration's budgets, which of those budgets does the council go forward with? Because we can't have two. So I would suggest that maybe we should have an answer to that basic question. Is it the first budget to be passed, or the second budget to be passed, or the last budget to be passed, or I have no idea. I have absolutely no idea. Having said that, I want to welcome the Conservative group to budgeting. I think the whole critique that I've had of the Conservative group going back ever since I was elected is that they haven't come forward with a budget or a budget amendment, an alternative, a costed budget. And this is the first time we've had that. And I think it's welcome. It's really a welcome to doing stuff in an adult way, in a grown-up way, in taking advantage of the excellent advice which has been provided by our financial team in the way in which they've engaged with that. And I think it is to be welcomed that we have got an alternative budget in front of us tonight. However, I've been setting budgets in Salisbury. My first one was in 1991. So I go back 20, nearly 30 years doing this. And I suspect that Ricky Rogers is not far behind me on that. We've been through the process of setting budgets many, many, many times. And what I'm going to say to you now is that this is the first time during that period where Jeremy Nettle has turned around and said anything nice or pleasant about the Liberal Democrat, Labour, independent budget, the admin budget. And he said he's complimented us on the budget. He congratulates us on the budget which we put forward. And it's very similar to what the administration budget is doing. The amendment that he's putting forward is very similar to what we want to achieve. That's great. I welcome his admiration for our budget, and I have to say it's very different to what I was reading in the papers this time 6-8 weeks ago, when we were getting it in the neck from the leader of Wiltshire Council, Richard Cluer, and his colleagues, all presumably briefed on WhatsApp about what they should say, where we were told that Salisbury City Council was about to go bankrupt. 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 And here is the Conservative budget, which, to quote Jeremy Nettle, it's very, very similar to ours. The problem is that the rhetoric from the leaders at Wiltshire Council don't match up to the reality of what their colleagues are putting forward here. And I suspect that there will be something of an argument over the next couple of months as we go up to the local elections on May the 1st as to whose line do we take. Do we take the line that the Liberal, Labour, independent admin budget is very, very similar to the Conservative budget, or is it wasteful? Is it profligate? Is it going to make Wiltshire Council, in Richard Cluer's words, bankrupt? Bankrupt. Bankrupt. That's the question, isn't
Councillor Sample,
Who's telling the truth?
This isn't a have a go at Wiltshire
Who's
Council
the tell-
meeting. This is a let's
Who's
stick
telling
to
the
budget.
truth? Is it Jeremy Nettle or is it Richard Cluer? And I think the electors will decide. So, since 1991, I've been here several times before. What is the main difference? There's some capital adjustments which the Conservatives are going to make, which are designed to take money out of reserve and put it into what? What have Conservative councils done in the past in Salisbury? What do they spend the money on? They spend it on car parking. When they're faced with a large amount of money, what do? They spend it on concrete for car parks. We've seen it before. We had a windfall of money as a district council. What did the Conservatives want to spend it on?
Paul,
a
please,
car stack.
can we please bring this back to the City
A
Council's
car
budget,
stack.
please?
A car stack, Mr. Chairman, in the central car park, or do you spend it on a leisure centre, which is what the Liberal Democrat Labour coalition drove through in the end? That's the question. Do you want to spend it on a car stack, on more concrete, or do you want to spend it on the people? And that's what we, the Liberal Democrats, Labour and the administration with the independents want to do. And that's the main difference. And that's why I'm going to vote against it, Chairman. Thank you.
Right. Thank you. I'll just come back on the first point that Councillor Sample made about which budget do you choose. The working assumption is with 5 Conservatives and 14 members of the administration here, if you can't get your budget through, yeah, then you've got some serious questions to ask, surely. If it had been a more even split, then we might have done this differently. But the working assumption is at 14-5, you might get your budget through against this one. Members also have quite strong feelings about what happens at county, but this isn't about county. We don't build car parks. We don't build leisure centres. Crikey, it doesn't look like we'd even fix a car park. So let's keep it to what's relevant to us, please.
Just a couple of points on the capital projects that Councillor Nettle was proposing. The splash park is the one that sits most difficult with me if we had the money, which at the moment we don't. Why do we need one, given that we have 3 beautiful parks, all of which have rivers running through them, which we watch children playing very happily in every summer? We've got Lizzie Gardens, we've got Churchill Gardens, and we've got the park at Harnham, all of which are very happily used by families with kiddies running around, splashing in and out all summer. In an era when public money is tight, in my mind, there is always going to be something more urgent to spend that money on. And so for that reason, I wouldn't ever vote for it, even if we had £500,000 knocking around. So just to let you know that. The artificial pitch, we all know that we have a woeful lack of sports pitches, and we'd all like something to be done about it, and we'd all like to see property developers held to account to make sure that they provide more facilities of that type within the large developments that have gone on all around Salisbury. If there is to be something like that, I think it needs to be the subject of far greater debate than just choosing that particular site. And I understand that you've got to sort of plonk on somewhere, but I think it needs to be a council-wide debate in 3 or 4 years' time when the money's actually there. I don't think we should be theoretically spending it while we haven't got it. And I think the same goes, there's the Churchill Gardens one. I am personally very dubious about what the Environment Agency's attitude would be to that. Given that it's on a floodplain, it's in a nature-sensitive area. Water's got to go somewhere. We've already flooding issues on Southampton Road. So I don't want to go on and on about this because, as Councillor Hocking has rightly pointed out, this budget is not going to be adopted, the one that you're putting forward at the moment. But there are points in there, those are the points in there that I would like to discuss in the future, not this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Annie. Sharon.
Thank you. It's the splash park, and it's not that I don't like them, but I have concerns about the cost of one going forward. I've also got concerns because Salisbury in itself a splash park. We are surrounded by water. I would rather see the money making it even more environmentally friendly and not have chemical water park in the city. Thank you.
So you'll support our budget without the splash park, is that what you're saying?
Main issue.
Councillor Rimmer, Ed.
Thank you. Can't support this budget, I'm afraid. I just, as people have said, the splash park, I just don't see how we can sit here in front of residents and tell them we're going to cut funding from the museum, the toilets, causing all a splash park on a football pitch. It just isn't the right time to be doing these sorts of things. We've only got 400,000 roughly in the general reserves. It needs to be somewhere near 1.4 million. And we're not going to get there spending money on things like this. And I just don't think it's what local residents want us to be doing. I think they want us to be sensible with their money. Our main responsibility is to spend their money wisely. And I don't think that this achieves that at all. So I can't vote for it.
Thank you, Councillor Rimmer. 15-5 then. Councillor Bayliss.
Thank you, Chair. I'm somewhat sceptical about the value of this Churchill Gardens car park work. I think £350,000 for 120 spaces, which aren't always flooded, is an incredible amount of money, £3,000. You're also putting up a barrier, potentially putting up a barrier to people using Churchill Gardens, where at the moment they can drive up, park freely, and use the park. And I'm all in favour of encouraging people to use the park, particularly residents who I'd expect to walk, wheel, or use public transport to get there anyway. But obviously, people coming from outside Salisbury need to be able to park their vehicles. You're risking pushing people from that car park to other spaces further down the road. You've got the Southampton Road retail parks, which are free. You've got the Peters Finger Park and Ride, which is free if you park there and don't use the bus, which is less than 10 minutes walk down the road. You've also got Wiltshire College students who may use that car park, and you're basically putting up a financial barrier to them using it. So I'm somewhat sceptical about the value of this exercise. Thank you.
Thank you, Al. Caroline.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to the Conservative group for putting forward a budget. Are we 13 years or 12 years as sitting councillors? I can't remember, it's a long time. But I think this is the most mature budget meeting that we have ever had. And actually, we should all be working together collaboratively. We are a parish council. Okay, the largest. And our lovely new officers, Steve and Asa, have made it much easier for councillors to get involved and understand the whole process. My comments on your budget, again, the Environment Agency opinion around the car park. A multi-use pitch is great, but I can't see the residents at Lower Bemerton going for it anyway. I don't think our budget has actually lacked aspiration, because as much as there's not much new in there, you've removed supporting Wiltshire Creative, and you've cut some of the communities thing. Well, actually, I think that we're about empowering people. We want to empower our residents to contact us and engage with our things. So by you removing the Wiltshire Creative bit from the grants, it actually means that the City Hall is even longer away before that could potentially be enacted, because Wiltshire Creative was one of the bidders to take that on and run it. So if we cut our funding to them, that may possibly be more damaging to the prospect of getting the City Hall up and running. So I can't support your budget, unfortunately, but thank you very much for putting one forward.
Thank you, Caroline. Tom.
Well, I suppose it'd be no surprise for me to say that I'm not going to be supporting the Conservative budget, but I will echo previous comments of it is very welcome to hear it. And I will repeat some of the comments I made last Monday, which of course many people here were not here for, understandably. And I'll just start with the fact that I think your build-up of your reserves is too thin. You know, it's not robust enough. I think where the Churchill Gardens car park proposal is, I am just going to lightly touch with my reiteration that I think the income generation that you can expect to get from it is extremely low because it is an outdoor car park. So when we had low car parking charges, they were at least being paid. When we were half forced into a position of increasing the car park line with the other car parks, we were effectively taking no money whatsoever as nobody parked there. And that's what led to us ending up cancelling all charges for that car park and also therefore removing the cost of having to have the costs associated with the parking money being collected and the administrative fines for those that weren't paying for their parking correctly. So I think your 350,000 for raising the car park, in line also with the comments of I would have suspicions that the Environment Agency would have quite substantial issue with it, given the sensitive nature of it being right next to the river. I think that would be a big challenge in permission, but I think your income generation, even with pay on exit, it would take many, many years, I think, to be able to recoup the money. I just don't think it's viable, personally. I did ask those questions last time in terms of what you thought your income generation would be. And I know that's a difficult question, but I didn't actually get any answers forthcoming. So on that specific point. Also, last Monday, I also mentioned the £25,000 removal for the community grants. I cannot support that in any way. I think that's an integral we do in terms of giving back to the city and helping to incentivise our local community groups. It's an important and active part of what we do. I appreciate you've only removed it in the first year, but there's every risk that once the new administration is in place, if that money's not there, it doesn't get put back in thereafter. So I am mightily concerned at the loss of that. Creative. I know for all the former mayors here, it will sit difficultly the thought of the involvement you get when you're the mayor of Salisbury, or the aspects of where you get to meet the different people who benefit through the little bit of funding that we introduce. And often the match funding that is sourced is in response to the little bit of money that we throw in. And often they actually draw in a lot more money through the fact that the local council has chipped in a little bit. And I know 63,000 might sound like quite a lot, but I think the investment over time and the investment in our communities is substantial. And I would also just reiterate another point that I made last Monday, is that part of the appeal of Salisbury is its arts, is its culture. So many people arrive in Salisbury and think, oh, what a wonderful place. Do you know what? I'd like to live here. And that 63,000 actually just helps to be a part of that culture. The little bit of money that we invest in our arts just to help keep it a vibrant city does have a knock-on effect, a positive that is, for all of us that have been a mayor, we get to see it in an extra special way because of the different communities that we get to interact with. So those little bits I do take significant issue with and could not possibly support. And if I didn't feel like I had an administration budget to support, if I thought this was the only thing, I'd be quite vociferous on the point. Another one, the tree maintenance budget. You have it at half the value of the administration budget, which is an increase, but it's not as significant an increase. And I make the point over many years, the Conservatives have needs of our tree maintenance. And as a councillor with a lot of trees of concerned residents highlighting does need increasing by the margins for which are in the administration budget. Trying to sort of do a piecemeal is just not enough, and it does need to meet those needs. And I have to say, for the 3G pitch in Lower Bemerton, just to reiterate again from a point from last week, that is footways improvement requests for Lower Bemerton, and I do have significant reservations about the residents there being in any way positive to the idea of having groups coming and going from that location. We already have significant parking issues with the school pickup and drop-off periods, especially for pickup, where they park, I won't say quite indiscriminately, but they do block what little bits of pavement there are there, and the roads are obviously very narrow. And the idea of having people coming to and fro every hour for their session, I think would be a little bit overbearing on that location. And I do think that if you had a pitch and you didn't put the lighting in, this time of year, what would be the point of having the pitch? Because you wouldn't be able to use it after 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And then, as I also said, I don't think the location lends itself to having any floodlighting anyway because of the river. So I'm sorry, I don't think they're things that can really go forward. The idea of having a 3G pitch, though, very attractive if there's
Tom,
a location that
you
could be more
wind up?
appropriate.
We've got a load of other people that want to go as well.
Okay.
So I don't mean to cut you off, but if you could.
Understood.
Thank you, Tom. Councillor Broom.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think as a group, we wanted to clarify some of the discussions that we've had around the closing of the toilets, which has obviously caused quite a lot of conversation. I think we all agree that there is a possibility of savings around this, but it's important that we have other viable options before we just go ahead and close toilets. A lot of us know that we do need conveniences around the city for people coming in, especially the tourists. And a few years ago, I did do quite a big piece of work on the community toilets because I've had experience of those elsewhere in the country. And I did present a paper to the then clerk about this. But unfortunately, it didn't really sort of go anywhere. But there are other areas where it does work very well, and the community have come together and the businesses have worked with the council to provide toilet provision with an undertaking that the council does give an allowance, I suppose, if you like, to said businesses for the increased cleaning, toilet rolls, etc., etc. And so, there is an opportunity to really make this work with proper consultation and proper discussion with the businesses and getting them on board. The one that I've experienced in particular, where my brother lived, they close their central toilets and don't have any public conveniences at all in their high street, but all of the businesses have signed up to giving that provision. It's very well signposted. All of the participating businesses have signs in their doors, and I tested it out again quite recently, and it works very well. And they've said, that in some cases they feel it has generated extra business onto their premises. If people haven't initially stopped, they've gone back and had a coffee or whatever. But I do think the important thing to note is that we don't feel that we just close the toilets. We have to have a viable option available for people that's clearly evident when they come into the city. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Joe. Councillor McGrath.
In the interest of time, Chair, I'll save my comment until the next item.
Thank you, Charles. Sam Charleston.
Are there any other Sams? Thank you, Chair. Just want to start off by saying I agree with Councillor Caroline Corbyn's words about the maturity and the general niceness, the grown-up nature of this debate. Everyone's mentioned F&G last week. I wasn't there. Starting to wish that I was. It seems to have been such a lovely meeting. I must also commend the Salisbury Journal for their coverage of that meeting. I was able to follow it in almost near real time. It was a very comprehensive live stream, and I thank them for that. I think the kind words from Councillor Nettle about this, about our budget, so the administration budget, is very kind. And I think if the positions here were reversed, if this was the budget that was on the table, I can't say I would be thrilled with it, but I can't say I would be, extremely disappointed with it either. So, thanks for bringing this budget to here. In terms of the big projects that have been proposed, the splash pad and the car park and so on, I think, to break with other councillors here, I don't really have a problem with them. I like the idea of a splash pad. I have small children. Sometimes it's nice to not have to fish them out of the river. I really like them. And I think that, as I think has been mentioned before, if we could perhaps just keep a pin in these ideas, does not let them go away. And, if we look at where we would hope to be in the next 5 years, perhaps there is scope for going, yes, let's absolutely do that. And I would support, that as a general sort of concept. I have 3 issues really with this budget. I agree with Tom Corbyn. I won't say any much more about that. It's clearly a difference in priorities. It's not mine, no. So that would be a red line for me. The second one is around the issue of cybersecurity. And I know there was a very comprehensive report into the City Council's sort of, ICT offering and some key recommendations that I think correct me if I'm wrong, but we as an administration have funded in our budget. Is that correct? We have accepted those recommendations. I think underlining for me was, I think we sat in one of the last area board meetings, and the Police and Crime Commissioner was telling us about the number of cyber attacks that were occurring during the Dawn Sturgis inquiry, almost on a minutely basis. They were coming in constantly. Perhaps it's a strange idea that we may get foreign interference in our communication or our computer systems here at the City Council, but we could have said the same thing about a Novichok attack in the city centre. I think that's an absolutely vital consideration, and one that I'm very glad that we are funding. And then finally, the phasing out of counter allowances, I think, is such a small, it's a very thin end of the wedge. No one gets into local government for the money. I'm not a city councillor because I get £600 a year in allowance. I'm not, but what it does allow me is to say, I need a babysitter for the night and I can pay for that. Or I need to get a taxi down here because I can't, I don't run a car. Or, it allows me to perform my duties as a councillor in a way that is not mean I have to be independently wealthy. And yes, it's a parish council, and yes, the allowance is tiny, but that argument is valid at all levels of local government and for all representatives. For that reason, I would not support that. So those 3 reasons I won't be supporting this budget. Sort of part of me wishes perhaps we could have been having these conversations around a table upstairs and come out with a single unified budget. Appreciate there's reasons, lots of reasons why that couldn't happen, but perhaps it's one to consider for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. For a moment, I thought it was going to be 13-6 for a minute, but thank you. And of course, there is only one Sam. Yes, not quite sure what I was talking about. Ricky, there's only one Ricky.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I'm just looking at Paul. Mine was 1988. Was the first budget, and I remember running the gauntlet during the POTAX protest, trying to get into this building to set a budget. You probably wouldn't be far behind that. That was an experience. I think you heard earlier about when we had the administration report about harmonious working. It's probably more reality like compromise. And I genuinely do believe this, that everybody in this room, in this chamber, every elected member wants the best for Salisbury and the best for their community. I genuinely do believe that. It's just that we have different ideas on how to achieve that. Different opinions, different ideas, nothing wrong with that. That's a democracy. It's quite healthy, isn't it? If we were all the same, it'd be quite boring and dull. So, even though we may have an argument, a difference of opinion, there's nothing wrong with that. We don't unlike one another just because we don't agree. So I want to congratulate the Conservative group on alternative budget. There's a damn lot of hard work goes into this, putting it together. So, congratulations. Thank you for putting in the work to produce an alternative budget. I just want to, I hope that you take them as helpful comments on, I hope they're not vanity projects. I hope they're serious projects you're highlighting. The first one was Churchill Gardens, 350,000. My experience of, the car park, let's face reality, it's in a floodplain. And whatever you do on the floodplain, whether you raise it, the water is displaced somewhere else. I think you're going to need to ensure that water doesn't end up on Southampton Road, the A36. Because that's all it does. When you raise something, it displaces the water somewhere else. So just be careful with that one. The 350,000 multi-use artificial pitch. I know the sentiments are good, but the reality is this. A multi-use, whether you call it 3G artificial, to make that work nowadays, it will have to be floodlit, it will have to be open from 8 o'clock till 10 o'clock to build enough funds for the 10-year, 15-year replacement costs. You're almost building a sports centre to make it work. That's the reality of any artificial 3G pitch. The hourly rate becomes out of most people's reach, 90 to 130 pounds an hour to hire it. So, and if you look at, and I have walked, Bemerton Rec many times, it's not a full-size pitch by any means. It's a junior pitch, always has been. It's so close to the river. Can you imagine the ecological damage and the protests about light pollution? I have that from extensions further along Lower Road that back onto the river. So I just think it's an unreal, in my opinion, an unreal location. When you think 100 most used artificial pitch in the whole of the city, and they desperately need 150,000 because they've reached the end. It's reached the end of its life. Their whole project is 350. They need new LED lights to reduce the light pollution. So that would be a far better, in my opinion, scheme to support than choosing Lower Bemerton Recreation Ground, which would never get planning. Someone to adopt and take on the ongoing maintenance. And we said no. Ideal for 3G artificial pitch, and there's already £250,000 via a 106 agreement sat in an envelope in Wiltshire Council planning officer's drawer. I put it there. It's ready. We just want this council or somebody to take on the ongoing maintenance costs. So that, I would push for that. I love the idea of the splash park. I would support that. But let's just be realistic. Anything involving money comes with a huge, huge risk for safety, for ongoing revenue costs. Would it require lifeguards? What is the specialist cleaning required? I think all of that, I think it's a great idea. But let's have a realistic report on what it's going to cost us, not just to build it, what's going to cost us year on year on year. I can tell you, whenever your council got leisure centres, whenever you've got a pool, the insurance costs are astronomical. Because I really do thank you for bringing these proposals. I just think you need to come into the real world and do some real explorations to see whether any of these are achievable. But well done.
Thank you, Ricky. Right, I have Atticle, and then I'm going to let Jeremy come back on any of the points, and then we're going to go to the vote. Atticle.
Thank you, Chairman. I did try to get the attention of the Deputy Mayor, but I think he forgot to mention my name. Chairman, I think it's a very ambitious budget. And one thing it doesn't add up to me, though. In one hand, you are trying to attract more visitors, but on another hand, you are closing both toilets. One is the central car park and the Market Square, which is very vital. So,
sorry, Atticle, for clarity, this budget doesn't propose closing both of them.
It doesn't say
Market Square, but not Central Car Park. If it's in the papers.
It doesn't say so, unless I missed it. But then again,
it's in the papers.
The budget is very ambitious. It looks good on the paper, but how much is reality and how much can be achieved? that is another question. But also fundamentally, we have to have our eye on our reserve of instead of decreasing, we have to think whichever the budget comes in future, the reserve is up, not as it is currently stands. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Article. Jeremy, over to you to sum up. I'll give you 2 minutes, then we're going to go to the vote because we've still got the admin's budget to go through in a minute.
Of course, for a moment, I thought you were just bringing it to turning, keeping the discussions going so we get up to 9 o'clock. That would be totally wrong of me to think that, wouldn't it? Anyway, I just thank you for your comments because it's actually very useful to get that. And I think I agree that some of the, as I said right at the beginning, most of the things that the officers have recommended that we need to do, we've supported that. We may have trimmed some of their aspirations, but we've supported quite a few of those things as well. Aspirations, absolutely aspirations. I think that it was our opportunity to look forward to think of what people of Salisbury would want. And we've put this forward because this was something that we had comments back, and it just felt that this was the right time to do that. So very happy to take some of the points on board of that. I would say, and most of you have mentioned this, that this isn't the right time. There will never be a right time, to be quite honest, because something will come up, something we have to spend, as Ricky said. You know, and I think that that's why we push this well out to 4 and 5 years, 4 and 5, because we know that the first thing we need to do is increase our reserves. So I think that I just really wanted to say thank you very much for all your input and for actually listening to this and your contributions. I think that those of us who may or may not be here next time, or those of you who are here next time, you know, let's reflect on what we can do for this city. There's some great ideas all around this table, as been mentioned, and I think that we should think that. I just want to make one small point. I'm not against the arts, and nor is our group. I'm not against, certainly not against theatre. But I do think that we've come out of COVID, and actually the arts desperately needed us for the years that we supported, and the 3 years that we've supported them after COVID. No doubt about it. The museum was desperate to get its lottery grant. We, as Councillor Corbyn said, by supporting them, they got their lottery grant. Fantastic news, fantastic for Salisbury. At some stage, we as councillors need to decide who else out there needs our support, and do we actually meet what the residents want for this council. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Jeremy. Right, we have a motion on the table. It's proposed and seconded. So all those in favour of supporting the Conservative budget, please raise their hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All those. I think you lost that one. Good effort, but no cigar.
Chair, can I ask whether you voted? Because did you count yourself? Or
I
not?
would only vote I only ever vote if I'm the casting vote from the chair poll on anything. So
surely you voted for your own group's budget.
I'm chairing the meeting. I'll let the fight continue between you guys. An abstention? Article. Okay. Nine, 8, 7, 6. Do we want to call a 2-minute halt for a second? Yeah? Victoria, you look like you're nodding furiously. So, yeah. All right, what's the time? All right, we'll come back again in 5 minutes' time, 8:10. Yep, so meeting adjourned for 5 minutes.